Gentlemen, welcome to the Manlihood Mancast. Really glad you guys tuned in. We've got an amazing interview with Jonathan McLernon, who has been through some amazing scenarios. The story that he's going to tell about the trauma that he's endured is phenomenal, but more importantly than that, he's going to walk us through how he turned that situation into an opportunity for his life to change for the better. And listening to his story about overcoming that is really powerful. Really powerful. He's a fantastic guy, and I'm really looking forward to this interview with Jonathan McLernon. But before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know we're giving away this amazing everyday carry knife from Haines Knives, Haines knives.com. You can find them on social media at Bird Forge. This is called the Black Pearl, and it's a knife that was made just for Manlihood to be able to give away to you. It's one of a kind, hand forged. This guy is an expert. I mean, it's like super sharp, and it is gorgeous. So if you want the chance to win this, go to manlihood.com/contests. That's manlihood.com/contests. You can enter to win. The enter to win is free. All you have to do is sign up. But if you want to get extra chances to win, you can send $1. For every $1, you get another chance. So if you got $20, you got 20 chances to win this thing. So go to manlihood.com/contests and enter to win. With that being said, guys, let's get into our interview today with Jonathan McLernon. Jonathan, it's great to have you on the podcast, man. I've really anticipated this conversation, so I'm excited. It's going to be good stuff. How are you today, man?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. So I'm over in Australia right now. Normally I live in Canada, so I'm just escaping winter for 2 months because where I live just gets like a brutal winter. So, seeing the sun come up, enjoying the summertime in February seems a bit weird, but I'm loving it.
Awesome. Yeah, go from one almost oppressive regime to another oppressive regime. No, I'm just kidding. At least the weather's great, right?
Hey, man, I'm not in disagreement with you.
I've been hearing a lot of the stuff going on in Canada and Australia, and I'm like, what in the world is wrong? Like, what's happened there? It's crazy.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
And I don't want to get super political, but it's definitely crazy. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, there's definitely things that I don't agree with. I'm very I like individual rights. So yeah,
definitely. I would tell you to come over here to America where things are better, but I don't know that it's really much better anymore. So
yeah, that's why we need good men in this world.
Exactly. Good men don't require a whole bunch of laws for them to be good men. So
True.
Awesome. Well, that's obviously not our conversation topic for today. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing, man? Because you've got a phenomenal story, and you have applied it in a really powerful way. So I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So I launched a company called Freedom Nutrition Coaching back in about 2018. I've been nutrition coaching before that, but this came about when a client said to me, I don't want to live in a nutrition prison anymore. And it kind of represented a shift for me. I myself have been going through this sort of personal transformation experience and trying to figure out why like all of the sort of standard sort of diet and exercise advice and supplements and things like that weren't really working for me, and trying to understand why I could like know everything. I was highly educated, but why couldn't I seem to apply what I know and what was wrong with me? And my explanation at the time, because I didn't really know any better, was there's something wrong with me. Like I'm just a loser. I'm a hopeless failure. I'm all these other things. And when I started studying the brain and behavioral psychology and how our brain actually functions and applies information, that all started to shift for me. And so I realized that if I'm going to help people lose weight, I didn't want to just be another 90-day, 12-week kind of program where it's like, let's get you a great transformation over the course of 12 weeks. And then who cares what happens the rest of your life? I wanted to try to help people get to a place where they could lose weight and keep it off. And so I often find myself like I talk about weight loss because it's one of the things people most commonly come to me for. But what I'm really wanting people to do is to accomplish like a genuine transformation in life. Like you can't go through this and come out of it the same person that you were when you started if you expect to create permanent transformation. And so I really try to guide people through that process, as messy and ugly and difficult as it can be.
So I know that having been a person that struggles with my weight and my eating in my own life quite a bit, you lose that that 40 pounds over and over again, or that 100 pounds over and over again. I think that's really part
That's the
of what
story.
drew me to your story, because I know that you've been through some of that as well, right?
I joke that I've lost 600 pounds. But what I'm really saying is that I've lost and gained the weight so many times that the heaviest I weighed was about 330 pounds. But I had lost and gained it so many times. And that was another thing for me to try to understand. Weight loss is an uphill climb and weight regain is a downhill slide. It's our biology. And I think I'll tell you one story. Going back to about 2015, I'd got to almost 100 pounds of weight loss. And, one December I was like, I just want to take it easy. I just want to enjoy myself over this holiday stretch here. And in my mind, enjoy myself was kind of like just eat whatever I want. And so for about 3 weeks, that's exactly what I did. Ate whatever I wanted. And in that stretch of time, I regained about 22 pounds. So just about a pound a day. That blew my mind. And I kind of freaked out a little bit because I didn't know what was going on or why this had happened. And it sent me into a downward spiral where I basically went all the way back to about 295 pounds. So I went from like regaining 20 pounds in 3 weeks, being so depressed at erasing so much of my hard work that, I almost went back to my original heaviest weight. That was the first time that happened to me. It happened to me again a couple of years later, but it was my first sort of open slap in the face that like as a weight loss is an uphill climb and weight regain is a downhill slide. But it's because our biology is such that like, our body, we're wired to survive famines. That's essentially what's happening. And so when we think about it that way, our body creates fat cells once and we get to keep them for life. And so the next time we encounter famine or food scarcity, we don't have to work so hard to be able to store that energy. Problem is our body doesn't recognize in the 21st century that we live in like this feast society with an abundance of cheap, completely nutrient empty junk food.
Yeah, that was that's the thing, right? The food that is there. So what is it that causes us to hold on to it? You know what I mean? Like you said, it takes work to get it off, and gaining it is the lack of work. But what is it that causes us to hold on to it?
I think in short that we're wired to survive famines. So the thing that frustrates us most in modern society is the thing that's kept human beings alive since the beginning of time. From the perspective of your biology, what is stored fat? It's just stored energy for a future famine, so a future food shortage. It's like an insurance policy. And our biology is such that, hey, we'll store as much as we can because we don't know how long the next famine might be and how long we could survive. And so when we reach a certain weight, our body also gets like what we call a set point. And so everything's kind of, we can look at it this way. It's like, it's calibrated for that weight. So my body had calibrated all the sort of internal plumbing and whatnot to be 330 pounds. So trying to lose that weight it's like you're sort of fighting. Your body's like, no, we're all set for operating at this weight. And so this is why also like plateaus occur. I just want to throw this in there. People get frustrated by a plateau in a weight loss journey. And like, it's actually a necessary part of the journey because what's happening is it's like your body hits pause on weight loss and goes, I need to recalibrate to this new set point. And if we don't give the body the chance to do that, then the old set point remains. And so a lot of people, I think, also just approach weight loss like it's this, I just got to do this thing for X amount of time and then I can go back to living my life. And it's like, you can't go back to the way you were living if you want this to stick.
Yeah. Well, I know that's the case in my life too. Like I've lost, a chunk of weight, and then you hit that plateau, and then you get discouraged, and you think, well, it stopped working. It's not working anymore, and then you just go back.
Well, let me just throw something your way because I think perspective really matters in this, and we often lose perspective from weight loss. 6 months sounds like a long window of time until we say you have 6 months to live. All of a sudden, it doesn't feel very long. And it's like most of us would like to have many, many years of life ahead of us. And in light of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 6 months is nothing. Like it's a blip on the radar. what often, and I think so, what overwhelms us though, so that's one thing. So we need to have that perspective when it comes to weight loss, right? Like this is not just a temporary effort, because it's like if your method has like an expiry date, so do your results, right? Again, you have to become a transformed person to keep those results. But the other side of it is, if we start to feel overwhelmed by maybe the magnitude, so let's just say like, I didn't necessarily go into my weight loss journey saying like, I have to lose 100 pounds. I mean, I kind of had a weight I wanted to get to, but if every day I was to think about, oh man, I've got to lose like 100, 120 pounds, like that just feels impossible, like soul crushingly defeating. And so then what we want to shift to is, okay, like at the weight I want to be, what's the kind of person that I am? How do I live my life? And can I become that person and focus on that, as opposed to always looking at this, giant like anvil hanging over my head?
So that picture of who I want to be and what kind of person I want to be is it's a better goal to set necessarily than, hey, I want to lose X amount of weight.
Well, I think about it like, so if I'm going to start working with somebody, there's kind of a process I go through. I don't just necessarily work with anybody who reaches out and says, can you help me lose weight? I want to get to know them first. And then I want to know if I'm the right fit to work with them, because I'm not the right fit for everybody. But if we're going to work together, we want to figure out like, what is your wellness vision? So in other words, I'll give an example I often use with my clients. I'll say, Josh, I want you to picture a red car. So obviously a picture is just showing up in your mind, a red car. And for those listening, you've been picturing a red car as well. And what's the car that came to mind for you when I said picture a red car?
A Porsche.
Okay. For me, it was the 1984 Lamborghini Countach. It was a poster I had on my wall as a kid. It's the car that I thought would just be the most amazing car to ever drive. So I used the term red car, and you pictured a Porsche. I pictured a Lamborghini, like two very different cars.
Mm-hmm. Yours is kind of boxy, mine's kind of sleek.
There you go. So if you come to me and say, like, I want to get healthy, I'm like, cool. I might have a picture in my head of what get healthy looks like. You have a picture in your head of what get healthy looks like, but they might be two totally different pictures. So I need to know what you're picturing in your head. And so I call this like, we create our wellness vision. What is it? I need to know what it is that you are picturing that you want to move towards. From that point, I go, first of all, is your timeline realistic? Right? Like, you might say, well, I want to lose like 60 pounds in 4 months. I'm like, you want to saw off a limb? Because there's not, unless you have like hundreds of pounds to lose, there's no way you're doing that sustainably, like, and comfortably. That's just gonna be horribly uncomfortable and really not sustainable. So now that we have this picture, we go, okay, this is what you want to move towards. From there, we go, okay, who does that person look like? Like, what do they live like? What does their day-to-day life look like? Because your lifestyle is going to look different if you're going to be that person. For example, like, I want to be able to play with my kid. I want to be able to get on the floor. I want to climb the stairs. I want to run after him. If he starts going for traffic, like, I'm an older dad. I'm 41. My kid's 2. Like, I got to be able to keep up with him. And so I know what I want to be able to do in order to. And so that's what it really becomes about, as opposed to, say, like, a number on the scale. So then we go, okay, we can probably break this down into like a series of like habits and behaviors and things you do every day. And then we look at like your current ones. Now, if we try to change 20 of these all at once, just, okay, we're wiping the slate and we're starting. Here's 20 new rules you have to follow starting today. Your brain's going to be like, screw this, I'm out, right? I'm not doing that. It sounds exciting in the beginning, and in all the dopamine and the excitement over creating change, you'll feel like, yeah, I can totally take this on. And then a week or two later, it's like, no, I can't. And so we need to do this in a step-by-step sort of cumulative fashion where we build, like, because we're kind of building skills here, not just like forcing your body to lose weight. We're building habits and skills and behaviors and the mindset to go along with it. So we go build this piece, and then we build this one, and then and so on. And over time, we've created this significant transformation, but it wasn't one giant leap. It was piece by piece. So it never felt overwhelmingly difficult to accomplish this. And then people are like shocked when they're a totally different person on the other side of working with me. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you find that a lot of this, I mean, obviously, there's the simple recipe, right? Eat less, move more, right? I mean, that's like the simple of the recipe. But Is there more to that?
Well, at its core, essentially we are consuming too many empty calories and we're not moving our bodies enough. Now, why that is the case is where things get a little bit more complicated, because human beings are complicated. So, we could look at it at a societal level. So we have technology that encourages us to move very little, because we can accomplish, like, literally, I can just order food from my phone and it shows up at my door, and I got to walk from my couch to the door. Seamless transactions, things like that. I don't have to even pull out my wallet. It's like already paid for, and so on. And so we basically have the society that's engineered to keep us not moving. We also have like literally millions of like junk food products that are essentially like addictive. They're kind of like drugs. And they're engineered. It's not an accident that they're addictive. Like, it's legit lights up your brain the same way that drugs do. Maybe not as powerfully, because I don't like the cocaine sugar comparison, but it still lights up your brain in an addictive fashion. So we got that. Then we have our brain. And our brain also doesn't want us to move, because remember, we have a famine biology. Our brain wants us to expend as little energy as possible to keep you alive and store as much energy as possible, because again, our brain is operating from this place of food is scarce. I have to eat as much as I can and move as little as I can. Remembering that throughout human history, prior to like electricity and everything that's followed that, everything was hard work. And we expended a lot of energy just staying alive. And now we don't have to expend hardly any energy to stay alive, but we can get just insane amounts of calories at our doorstep. And so we have that to contend with as well. So we have our environment, our physical, social, cultural environment, along with our biology to try to contend with. And then I believe that we live in a more emotionally and mentally stressful world, not physically, but mentally and emotionally more than ever before. Again, the advent of technology, the way that our brain gets overwhelmed with the fire hose of information that's being sprayed in our face daily, like, it is way more than any one person can ever take at any given time. We can now learn about everything horrible that's happening everywhere in the world. So we add that in, and that diminishes like our executive function as part of our brain that does the thinking. And so put all this stuff together, and most people, you don't have to remember all this. This is what I do, is I help you put this together without you having to think so much about it, because I'm an engineer. But you put all this together and you go, this isn't just you're a fat, lazy slob, right? If that was the case, like, yeah, I think most people aren't. Like, when someone says to me, like, oh, I'm just lazy, I'm like, I don't buy that. Let's figure out what's happening in your brain. Let's figure out why this is happening. And when we can figure that out, we go, okay, your old story wasn't a fat, lazy slob. The new story is this. Here's what's really going on. Once we understand what's really going on, now we can give you a solution. Because what's the solution to I'm a fat, lazy slob? It's work harder, you fat, lazy slob. Well, maybe you're burnt out. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're heavily stressed. And it's like your nervous system's already redlining and you're trying to push it harder. That's setting yourself up for like a breakdown. And so we have to look at this differently. And that's what I try to help people to do.
Yeah. I know that stress releases cortisol, and cortisol has an effect on how your fat is stored, because your body's reacting to the stress and saying, oh, it's time for a famine. And then you store. So yeah, it's on top of all the other problems that those hormones and chemicals and all that causes when you process it that way.
Yeah, cortisol is a fun one, because without cortisol, we'd be dead. And the cortisol is the hormone that helps us come from being asleep to being awake. So it's necessary, but it's when it's chronically elevated that's a problem. And so, of course, we have chronic stimulation and chronic stressful stimulation. Again, everything that social media puts our way, the news media, all this kind of stuff, like chronic stressful stimulation, elevating cortisol all the time. Well, cortisol says there's an emergency here. There's a serious situation here. I need to consume glucose, which is the body's form of sugar that it uses, as quickly as possible. And then so you get a blood sugar crash because it's using up all the available blood glucose. So now you get a massive craving. And it's like, I don't care what I need to eat. We'll use language like, I'm starving. You're actually not, but I'm starving. And then when you use alarmist language like, I'm starving, it's like, this is an emergency. I don't care if I pound 6 Snickers bars. I'm starving, and if I don't eat this, something really bad is going to happen. And it's like, actually, you're just uncomfortable. You're not actually starving. Right. So learning how to kind of reframe some of these things as well, and cultivate emotional resilience, so the ability to be uncomfortable. So we've become too comfortable. And again, it's not just because we're lazy people. We have a biology that wants us to move as little as possible. But we could just go, well, shoot, it's my biology, what I'm going to do, and give up. No. But it just means you have to know like what you're working with and what you're working against. But ultimately, it's still, there's an element of personal responsibility that's inescapable. So, I mean, even with like the food and everything else, like we still have agency and autonomy over what we eat and what we consume.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the bottom line is nobody else can lose my weight, right? Nobody else can get me healthy. That's got to be me. And understanding what our body is doing or what our mind is doing or why we think the way we think, that could either make us a victim or it could give us the opportunity to learn how to reframe it, like you said.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the word victim. I sat in victimhood for quite a while. I mean, I went through trauma. I was nearly beaten to death living in South Africa. Like it just messed with my head. And so if I've got, I think, a fairly legitimate reason to cry victim. My coping mechanism was binge eating, just smashing food to try to numb whatever I was feeling in my head after going through what I went through. And that went on for a number of years. And it was this behavior that I was horribly ashamed of, but felt out of control around. And so I just, and I share that mostly to put into context, like the stuff I'm talking about here. It's like, I've lived this. I've been in the crap for, I was in it for many, many years struggling. And so here's another important element here. So being a victim is attractive because to some degree, it says I'm powerless to change, therefore it's outside of my responsibility, and people get to feel sorry for me, so I get sympathy because I'm a victim. But ultimately, it's very disempowering, and there's a part of us that goes, I actually don't want to be that, even as appealing as it is to like not move and just get sympathy for people. It's like I want to rise above this, and it's only possible like on the inside. You have to want to do this, and I talk about finding what we call our emotionally compelling reason. Like, why do you want to be healthy more than you want to be a victim? What will get you out of bed to do something? And I go back to being a father. For me, is like, I mean, I love my wife, but I love my kid. Like, there's anyone out there who's a parent, like a father, like there's something about when that little human like comes in your life. Like, we as men, we actually love responsibility. We love, like, we're providers, we're protectors. It's what we're wired to do. This world that tries to like fight against this, we're not supposed to be this, or we're supposed to be ashamed of this. Like, screw that. Sorry. We're wired to want to be productive and things. And so something like being a father, like that brings something out of me where I go, this is something bigger than me. This is I'm not just living selfishly for my own life anymore. I have this little boy who's looking at me, who's imitating me, who's watching everything I do. I got to show him, like, I'm responsible for this. So for me, that's my emotionally compelling reason. It's why I keep going when sometimes I want to give up. And I still have feelings of wanting to give up, by the way. I mentioned that because I think we want to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with having feelings of wanting to give up. Those feelings are valid, but it doesn't mean we have to act on them.
Yeah. So you said this kind of briefly, and I don't want to gloss it over because, you said earlier that it's okay to kind of, whatever you talk about, you're willing to talk about it. Did you just say you got beaten or almost beaten to death in South Africa? Okay. Yeah. We've got to hear the story there. What's going on?
Yeah. So my wife and I were traveling around the world. We spent about 3 years doing this. And one of the stops was South Africa, because when we were living in Mexico, we met a young man from South Africa. And along the way, we visited in various countries. He's like, well, you have to come to South Africa. His parents were running a not-for-profit, teaching underprivileged young people life skills and whatnot. So I was a part of that. Sorry, there's some steps in the background. It's actually, I think, my little boy. I'm literally recording a podcast episode and I have signs on the door. And my little boy just bursts through the door. He can come say hi, I guess.
You would.
I'm so excited to see me.
Hi.
Sorry.
Hi.
You are too cute, buddy.
He was so excited to come see me. Oh man, but this is why we do what we do. Right? Hi. Yeah. Okay,
I'm surprised at how many times that actually happens when we're recording this podcast, man. And sometimes I edit it out, but honestly, sometimes I don't because it is amazing. So I love it. He looks just like you.
Yeah, but
human cloning is illegal.
Oh man, yeah. So yeah. Oh man, I could hear him coming down the hallway, and I was like, "Uh oh, I know what's happening." And of course, I love my kid, and I normally it's okay for him to interrupt, but I put signs in the door being like, "Hey, video."
Yeah, he can't
But
read.
of course, he can't read, and he knows how to open the door, so he just races ahead of mom, opens the door, bursts in.
That's the best.
Oh man, right when I'm telling this, really, Anyway, so we're down in South Africa. We'll get back on topic. Working on a nature reserve. And so we're teaching groups of about 30 students at a time. And this is set up. There's an educational building, dormitory, a building for like eating and things like that. And then like there's an instructor's cabin way off in the bushes kind of thing. And so I was walking back to the instructor's cabin one night, and everyone else is like in the dining hall. They're eating. They're all having a good time or whatever. And the door is slightly ajar. And this is nighttime. It's dark. I'm in flip-flops, sweatpants, t-shirt, just relaxed as ever, loving her work, loving the stuff we're doing. Our students are amazing. And the door is slightly ajar. I was like, I guess I didn't shut it properly. It doesn't register the deadbolts like sticking out of the door, and it's been like jimmied open. These are the details I remember after the fact. Open the door. There's 3 guys in the cabin sitting at the little table, making and drinking tea and eating rusks, which are these hard biscuits that South Africans eat. And again, still didn't register in my brain that something's off about this situation at first. I saw one of their faces and like, I recognize you. And he was one of the Rangers, but he wasn't in uniform. And so again, my brain didn't go, there's something wrong with the situation, because near Mountain Nature Reserve, it's like protected. There's fences and stuff like that. There's rangers and all this. So I wasn't thinking something's wrong with the situation. I didn't see the 4th guy. 4th guy was outside the cabin, and he smashes me across the head with a rock. And of course, now I'm like, what is going on? And the other 3 had now by this time like jumped up off the table and come bursting out the door and joined in on this. And the part that I remember the most was like I was wearing a shirt like this, a colored golf shirt. And this guy, he grabs like the scruff of this shirt. He looks like right into my eyes, smiles, and then says, "Shh," and then smashes me across the head again with this rock. And so now I'm concussed, and I wasn't quite unconscious, but they all pile on and just started like kicking and stomping, and I'm like screaming for help, but nobody can hear me because they're 3 buildings away, having a grand old time eating dinner and making dishes, and all this noise. And later on, in part of the debriefing, the students said we heard something, but we thought it was the monkeys screeching. I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of fitting, I guess." But somehow, like, I just had this thought, like, I can't die tonight. And maybe everybody thinks that when they're in a situation like this. Like, and if I'd been hit probably one more time across the head, like I would have been unconscious, and then they would have just kept the beating going until I was dead. Somehow I was able to, like, have the strength to kind of fight my way to my feet. And I can't really explain how. How do you do it? But I knew that I couldn't like stick around, and I managed to get to my feet, and then I just started like running towards the building where people were. It was probably a few hundred feet away. For whatever reason, they didn't chase me. I don't know why, because they could have very easily caught me and kept the beating going. And I managed to, get through the door, but my face is like covered in blood. I'm like staggering in, like boot marks all over me and stuff. I've been attacked. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know who's out there. And we ended up getting kind of trapped in this building because we got everybody in this building. My wife was incredibly brave in this experience. Got everybody in the building, got the doors kind of barricaded and whatnot. And I remember I was just like slumped in the kitchen up against some cupboards on the floor, holding a fork to like defend myself, I guess. I don't know. I'm concussed and I have no idea what kind of almost like what's going on. I just know I'm trying not to die, basically, and probably need some medical attention at this point. But and so thankfully, one of the students still had their cell phone, and they were able to get enough reception to call the police, which again, surprisingly, somebody actually answered. Police over there are not the same as over here. Like they just kind of try to avoid doing their job as much as possible and collect a paycheck. But it was a senior officer that answered, and so they actually dispatched some officers to come out. But it took about 45 minutes to get there because it's about 20 minutes outside the city, and then 20 minutes to drive through like the nature reserve to even get to where we are. And you can see in the nighttime all across through the other side of the valley where they come in, the red and blue lights flashing, right? So these guys have been trying to smash down the doors with shovels and things. And when they saw the lights, they just kind of melted in the bushes. So then the cops show up. And they're like, looks like nobody died. Nobody got raped. All right, cool, we're leaving. My wife was like, what? No, you're not. My husband needs medical attention. People saw their faces. They were at the doors. Like, there's stuff here. They're in the bushes. They literally just, they're not gone. You could find them. You have guns, Anyways, so she stood up to these like four big South African cops and was like, you're not leaving until everyone else is off here. We are not staying here tonight. Like, they're still out there, and we don't know how many of them there are, because they often travel in packs of like up to 15, like these roving gangs doing this kind of stuff. And so we got out of there, got to the hospital. I was concussed, but no broken bones, no brain damage, thankfully. They narrowly missed like my eye. There's like I have a little scar tucked in here that people can't see unless you look really, really closely. The hit was like right here, and it was, didn't break my orbital bone and things. Like, there's so many things about this that were like pretty lucky. Well, I'm a man of faith. I don't broadcast all that much, but I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and so I believe that He helped me survive that experience. And so, but the fallout from that was like, unless you've been through trauma, it's like hard to know. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't hardly know what I'd been through. But then starts like the flashes of rage and things like that, wanting to kill people, uncontrollable eating episodes, all these huge emotions that I didn't know what to do with, because for most of my life I'd never been, I guess never really been, it had never been modeled for me how to manage big emotions. And now that I look back through my childhood, I remember like I had a lot of temper tantrums as a kid, meaning I actually had a lot of big emotions that eventually had to come out, because I didn't, my dad, I love him. He's a wonderful man, but he didn't know how to express emotions, and he had a traumatic upbringing and so on. So I didn't know how to deal with them. And so that's what caused me to fall into this sort of binge eating and food addiction. And it was just me trying to numb everything that I was experiencing, because I didn't know what else to do. And so that's kind of the backstory as in a coconut-sized nutshell.
Yeah, your superhero origin story, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry that you went through that, for one thing.
Yeah, I'm actually grateful for it. Would you believe?
Yeah, well, no, I do believe that. I think that's part of the process of healing, is when you get to the place where you can look at the trauma and you can recognize the good that came from it. But what a crazy, horrible experience, dude. And it's crazy how, like, we often think about childhood trauma as the stuff that affects the rest of our life, but like, trauma can happen to you at any point, and like, that would definitely mess you up. Like what a powerless situation to be in. Even as tough as you could be, like, you get caught off guard. What are you gonna do?
Man, yeah, I was in flip flops and sweatpants, t-shirt, relaxed. I was not expecting to get jumped. I was caught off guard. I was outnumbered. Like, there's so much, and I have a strong sense of like fairness, and there's so much about that situation that was also just like straight out, flat out, like unfair and unjust, and that really angered me. These men actually murdered a guy the night before. The cops probably shouldn't have told us. So there's so many things that emerged after the incident. Like, that morning, it was a Monday morning. It was Monday night was the attack. That Monday morning, there'd been a helicopter like flying overhead, and we just thought it was like, maybe it's a aerial tour of the reserve or something like that. Now they were looking for like this group of guys that had smashed a farmer's head in. They'd beat his, like, the cops. They smashed his head in like a pumpkin. I'm like, they probably shouldn't be telling us this stuff, especially like a traumatized guy who just like been through an attack like that. And so, but and when we got to our cabin, because we would go back to the city for the weekend, and we'd come back during the week. And I remember the cabin that Monday morning. It was very messy, and I was thinking, well, I'll just talk to our boss and let them know. Let the weekend facilitators, like, could they just clean up after themselves, But probably that had actually been ransacked. These guys have been hiding out in the nature reserve, and like had ransacked the cabin. So there's so many things in hindsight when we look back. We go, man, had we looked at this through a different lens, we might have been a little bit more on our guard. But we weren't thinking about it like that. And I think that's the case in so many situations. So, I mean, yeah, helplessness, frustration, rage, anger. Like, I'm ex-military. I wanted to set traps for people. I knew when I got to this stage, because our house got broken into a lot as well. Like, crime in South Africa is so horrible. It's so rampant. It's so violent. I wanted to set traps for people so they would break into the house, and then I would attack them. I'd have the upper hand. And then I could, essentially, when I started plotting what I was going to do, I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, I can't, something horrible is going to happen. And either I'm going to do something horrible or something horrible is going to happen to me. We have to leave before that happens. Because there's still the voice in my head going, this isn't you. You're not a killer. You're like a teddy bear that hugs people, but I wanted to kill people. And yeah, that's when I knew, like, okay, we got to get out of this situation, because like one way or another, there's something bad. And we were horribly traumatized, because we never really had opportunity to process it either. And the thing with trauma is it gets burned into the part of your brain that doesn't register time. And that's why the trauma could have happened, a month ago, or 10 years ago or 40 years ago. It doesn't matter. Time doesn't heal this. And I share that because any men out there listening who've been through trauma, like, time doesn't heal it. You got to get help. That's the only way. And there's no shame in getting help.
So the weight gain and the binge eating was your reaction to that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So did it take a while before you got to that place where you recognized what was causing that?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of, like, because I already had interest in, like, health and fitness and whatnot, and I'd been an athlete growing up and stuff like that. And a part of me, like, knew, like, as much as I was eating, like, it wasn't really healthy, but I was also kind of in this place of kind of like dissociation and denial. So in my head, I was still picturing that I was this athletic guy, even though this weight was piling on. And people would say, well, it's like literally in front of you. Can't you see it? And I go, we kind of need to understand something here. Like, what we see with our eyes is not exactly what exists in the real world. There's filters. And so light comes in through our eyes, and then it goes to, like, filters our brain, which then, like, calculates and registers the information that we're seeing. And so in my head, I had this filter, this picture that, hey, I'm not that big. I'm still this athlete, and so on and so forth. So I was, in my head, I was changing what was actually staring at me in the face, you know? And so this place of dissociation, not only recognizing that this is what was happening to my body, and maybe not wanting to see it, not wanting to come to a place of realization of what was really taking place. And it wasn't until we got back to Australia. My wife's from Australia, and so we were over visiting her family. And, I got working on a cotton farm out here in, like, Queensland, which is like a tropical, ridiculously hot state. And that facilitated some weight loss, thankfully, but it didn't stay off. But that was when I was starting to sort of come to terms with what had happened. But it still took, like, a number of years to work my way through it, because the other thing is I look back now, like, I had a really disordered relationship with myself. So I didn't know anything about self-love or self-compassion or any thoughts I had about it, because, I would have dismissed, because I think I had this unhealthy vision of what masculinity looks like, or manliness looks like. And so, and feelings really sissy things like, I mean, I used to do motorcycle racing and like powerlifting and listening to heavy metal and snorting pre-workout. Like, I was...
Right. Well, I mean, other than snorting pre-workout, like, none of those are bad things, right?
But, no. But for me, it was a overcompensation, because
right.
I kind of had this awareness that I'm actually an empath. Like, I'm a really sort of gentle-hearted, caring kind of guy. I'm a big guy. I'm walk around at 6'1", 240. I'm not a small guy, but and sometimes my physical presence, like, it garners me respect without, but I was trying to be this thing I thought I was supposed to be, because I thought what I actually wasn't, like, manly enough, which is really interesting in hindsight. I didn't understand that it was okay to have all these emotions and feelings. And in fact, that was part of what made me masculine and human. And so it took until so the attack happened in 2011. It took until 2017 when I hired a coach, out of desperation, to really understand, like, how much I needed to learn about self-love and self-compassion and what it actually looks like through masculine lens, because it looks different than how we might approach it, and that's okay. He made it safe for me to kind of go through that experience myself. And so, learning about self-love wasn't about, like, bubble baths and eating chocolate and sort of feminine self-indulgence, and not to knock any of those things, but it was really about actually legitimately, like, manning up and taking care of myself, and then seeing those actions as, I'm not a worthless person because of these struggles. I'm actually a valuable, like, human being, because I hated myself. I hated my body. I hated who I became. And it was like I was trying to punish my body into submission. A lot of the stuff I was doing, I was just trying to beat my body into submission, and it wasn't working. And it never will. You can't hate your way into a healthy body. And so I actually had to learn what masculine self-love looks like.
Yeah. I have a friend who hated his body into submission, right? And it worked for a little while, and then he put the weight back on because it's not permanent, and I remember having that conversation with him, like, dude, like, I get it, like he was trying to help coach me a little bit. He's like, man, you got to look in the mirror and you got to say, I hate you. And I'm like, no, that's not going to help me, dude. It's not going to help me. And now, you know, a couple years later, I'm like, yeah, he hates himself still, and he hates himself again, you know? So
I don't know. Are you a dad, or do you have kids?
I do. I've got 4 grown kids now. So, and 2 grandkids,
Amazing.
3 grandkids. Yeah.
What? You look young, man.
Yeah. Well, the joke is that the fat pushes out the wrinkles. I'm actually
That's amazing.
I'm 44. So at the time of recording this, I'm 44. So I'm not that much, but I got an early start. My wife and I got married pretty young. She was 18. I was 19. Yeah. We had twins on our 1-year wedding anniversary, and yeah, so that's our world. You know, we're like, let's be young enough to enjoy the grandkids. You know, so.
Which is really cool. I'm like, I'm going to show up to my kids' graduation. They're going to be like, oh, it's so nice your grandpa came. You know,
my brother is just about your age, maybe a little bit younger than you, and he's got a 3-year-old right now. And I'm like, dude, that's awesome.
This is why I got to.
There's no way I could do that.
Yeah. This is why I got to take care of my health, right? Because I mean, you know, 60 doesn't have to mean I'm pushing a walker or like walking around like a cripple. Like we can take care of our health. But what I was thinking about was, imagine if I started every day saying to my son, "I hate you. You suck." Like it hurts my heart even thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
But imagine, like, how would he develop emotionally if every day I came at him with that energy? I hate you. You suck. You have to work harder. Like. It's just not going to work. And so we have to do this differently.
Yeah, you're right. That does not help you overcome your problems by beating yourself up.
Yeah. If it was going to work, it would have worked by now.
It doesn't mean you can't be real about the situation and tell the truth about the situation. I can look at myself in the mirror and say, that doesn't look good, man. Like you've messed up here. Like you can say that.
Yeah.
But.
So let me give you my analogy on compassion, or I guess kind of how I picture it. So, because I thought compassion was more like enabling. So let's say, like, do you have a vice, like some sort of food or drink or something that like is a bit of a trigger for you? Or
yeah. Convenience store pizza.
Okay, so let's just say I come by your place, just dropped in kind of unannounced. It's maybe a Tuesday afternoon, and you're kind of sitting on your couch. You're about halfway through this pizza, I know, and you're kind of like. You know, those who are listening, you can't see the expression I made, but anyways, you can just imagine looking up, kind of surprised, caught off guard. You know, now, yeah. If I come to you and I go, Josh, you stupid idiot, what are you doing? Like, you're a fat slob and you're not making this better.
Actually, makes me want to eat more pizza.
Right. So that's judgment, right? So judgment makes you not want to change the behavior, but get better at hiding the behavior because you don't want to feel the judgment. This was me eating a pizza in my car in a parking lot, like an entire large, like stuffed crust, double cheese, double pepperoni pizza, hating myself with every bite, but forcing myself to keep eating it because it's basically spite eating.
When you bought it, you don't want to throw it away.
Well, right? Yeah. And so, but that will just make you better at hiding the behavior. Right. It doesn't inspire the desire to change the behavior. Now, on the other hand, what if I came in and I was like, oh man, look, I get it. You've been having a hard day. You're already halfway through. You might as well eat the whole thing at this point. You know, it sounds like I'm being compassionate because I'm kind of letting off the hook a little bit and giving you an excuse for why you're doing it and giving permission to continue doing this self-destructive thing. That's called enabling, right? That's not compassion. Maybe that's where I got it twisted in my head. Compassion walks the middle road. So we're looking at your behavior without judgment, but we want to understand what's going on here and why you're doing it, and acknowledge that what you're doing isn't helping you. But it doesn't mean that you're a bad human being. Like every behavior probably could be categorized sort of like an attempt to solve a problem or attempt to meet a need. And so we go, like, what need is that behavior serving? Are you stressed out? Did you need a break? You know, are you bored? Like, what are you going through? Like that, if that behavior wasn't in some way helping you, even if it's a terrible long-term solution, like you wouldn't do that. Take smoking, for example. Like people who smoke, it's not like they don't know that smoking is terrible for your health. But in the moment, you ask a smoker, it's like, I just need to smoke. I'll quit tomorrow. That sort of thinking pattern. And it's like, right now, this problem feels more urgent and the smoke solves the problem faster. And then but it becomes a pattern that we start living out on repeat, this pattern of behavior. And there's so many patterns of behavior that we have that we start living on a repeat. We start living from this place of like urgent reactive response. Again, almost going back to this chronic stress piece. But if we take judgment out of the picture, it allows us to, I call it like wrestle with our demons in the light. People come to me, the stuff I hear that people have been through, I'm like, jeepers, I understand why you're doing this, and you're not a bad human being for doing this. Now, I'm not going to encourage you to keep doing this because I know it. Like, compassion isn't letting you destroy yourself. That is not compassion. But it's like, let me help you end the suffering. But first of all, let me hear you. Let me validate you. Let me say it's okay. Like, I understand why you're doing this. And we start from that place. Okay, now we can start to create real change.
So it's easy to picture that conversation between two of us, right? Like, that's the analogy that you just used. There's two of us. Let's walk that. It's harder, though, to picture that with one person. Picture that with yourself.
Yeah. You know, because I often think, why is coaching still a thing in like the 21st century? Why do people still hire me? I mean, I know why, but you know, I think it's good to ask these questions. If Google was going to solve all our problems, like if it was an information problem, Google would have solved it. And every time I say that, I think about like Ice Ice Baby. You know, check out the hook while DJ revolve it. Yo, I forget the line now.
Anyways, but my wife can rap it. Like,
there's a problem.
Yo, she's got it all memorized. So.
Oh man, yeah. If there's a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolve it. There we go.
There you go.
Something like that. Anyways, if information was the problem, Google would have figured it out for us. So it's not an information problem, right? This is a human problem. It's an implementation problem. So we have to understand, I call it living the gap. How do we bridge the gap between what we know and what we do? And if we don't know why we're living in the gap, we'll come up with stories like, I'm a loser, I'm lazy, whatever sort of story we come up with, whatever excuse come, because we don't really know. Like, I don't know why I do this. I don't know how to, and that's what I wanted to figure out. Like, why was I compulsively eating out of control? I had to figure this out, because if I could understand the behavior, then I can finally start to change it. And so you're right. I'll give a biological sort of explanation for why it is that we still need coaching. So to create transformation, we have to become vulnerable. But if you're isolated and alone, your primal brain goes, we're not doing this. It is not safe for me to become vulnerable like that. Right? It's risky, and I don't want to take that risk. But now I come into the picture and go, I've got your back. I create this space. I hate the cliche term create space, but anyways, I don't have a better term. So create this space for you to be vulnerable, where it's safe for you to be vulnerable and go through this process where I've got your back. You need to be heard? I'm here to listen. You need to be validated? Awesome. You're not sure what to do? I'm here to guide you. I've worked with hundreds of people, plus been on this journey myself. There's so much to that. And I still hire coaches because I'm still human. I still struggle. Doesn't matter how well I know this stuff. I still need help too.
Yeah. And, it's funny because over the years that I've had a love-hate relationship with the word vulnerable.
I agree.
Just because, like you said, like, you don't want to be vulnerable with just anybody. Like, it's not a virtue to be vulnerable.
I like that.
Like, everybody's like, oh, he's a great man because he's vulnerable. That's not what makes him a great man. He's a great man because he's vulnerable to the right people. You know what I mean? Like, like being vulnerable is walking into that, cabin without being aware of what's going to happen to you, And so I get that. Like, was that hard for you then to overcome that vulnerability because of that?
Yeah. And I think I know exactly why you're saying what you're saying, because there's like victimhood vulnerability.
Right.
And that's the people that get hooked on like being vulnerable and using that as a reason to stay stuck.
Right.
Right. And I think maybe if I have it right, that's kind of what you're talking about when you say this love-hate thing with vulnerability. If I'm always pulling out the vulnerability card, I'm just looking to make people feel sympathy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Here, like, I'm being vulnerable and I'm sharing my story, but I'm also saying, like, I didn't stay stuck in that. I did for some time. I wanted to be a victim. I acted like a victim, and I was stuck for a number of years. Couldn't seem to figure my way out of this. It actually took someone, a coach, who was not emotionally connected to me necessarily to impartially look at like a third party observer and go, here's the things you can't see. It's like, try to see between your shoulder blades.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. But someone who's not connected to you, hey, let me tell you what's going on.
By the way, you also can't lick your elbow.
Yeah.
So you need somebody else to do that.
I'm sorry. I'm sure. I was like, I bet there's got to be like some hyper flexible person who can like dislocate their shoulder and like, and I'm sure there's a TikTok video of them actually successfully licking their elbow, or maybe they have abnormally short humeruses or something.
Sorry for making the bad joke there. No, but in all seriousness, though, you're right. Like there are parts of you that you can see, and having someone that you can trust to be able to help you see that is everything.
Yeah. And so it's like, for those who are tempted to make vulnerable posts on social media, it's like, it's okay, but like, don't go to that well every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay. Like, so emotions and feelings are valid to some degree, right? Like I say complaining sort of has a place. It's you trying to express like, hey, I'm feeling this right now. I just need to get this out. Awesome. But don't stay stuck in the place of chronic complaining. Complain, be heard, and then decide, okay, now I'm going to do something about this. Whatever it is that I can do, and what I can't do, I will move past.
Or get help if you need help.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's an interesting exercise just around the spheres of control, and it's kind of like 3 concentric circles. And the first one is the one you have direct control over. The second one you have some influence over. And the third one you have like no influence, no control over. And you just look at, where's your time, attention, energy going? Is it going into that third biggest circle, all these things you have no control over? That'll keep you stuck and feeling like a victim.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you want to create change, it starts with the things that you can directly control, which will then spill over into the things that you have some degree of influence over. That will feel a lot more purposeful.
And I think that, you said you're a man of faith, so this might make sense, but the idea that, if you're faithful with little, you'll be given much. Mm-hmm. So if you take control of those areas that you do have control over, you'll get more that you have some more control over. You know what I mean? I think it kind of expands that circle when you master what you have.
Yeah. This personal responsibility is like a big thing. Like we touched on earlier, we live in a world that's engineered to make us fat and make us sedentary and make us want to be victims, disempowering us, especially men. It's a subtle war on masculinity. It's not like an overt declaration of war. It's a subtle war. The feminization of our men. And it's not just, it's done through media, it's done through food products. And it may sound like a conspiracy theorist. I don't even know if it's entirely deliberate, but the fact is we know that eating certain food products like crushes testosterone production down to like nothing. So does being obese though. When we're obese, our body fat produces an enzyme called, name escapes. Anyways, it produces an enzyme that will convert testosterone into estrogen. So it's like this vicious cycle. And so for me, I remember like I did a hormone test to figure out like what was going on in my body, and it was like, where's your testosterone? Like, I'm not seeing any. My estrogen levels were off the charts. And so it was this really, really tough place to be where like, I was pretty strong and whatnot, but like I couldn't seem to get anywhere. And it's because I had this super high estrogen levels. So estrogen, testosterone, and cortisol all kind of have the same precursor. And we can sort of shunt between the three. And so all of my testosterone was being diverted into making estrogen and cortisol as opposed to testosterone. And so, and then we figure like there are foods that we eat, of course, that drive us to become obese. And as such, again, it's killing, like our testosterone production has never been lower at a human level. And people are trying to say, well, this is a good thing. I'm like, no, it's not. Low testosterone, like high testosterone is not what makes men aggressive. It makes them productive. It makes them actually great men. It's like, it's insecurity. And, it makes men behave poorly. And while we're sort of here, I'll just say, like, I really don't like the term toxic masculinity, although I know why it exists, because there are certainly behaviors that aren't helpful. But the message we're giving our young men is, by virtue of you being a man, there's something wrong with you. And it's like, no, there's not, damn it. I love being male. I love being, and my wife loves it too. She doesn't want, like, I don't want to sound mean, but I'm like, look, she doesn't want me to be like this sort of lapdog who's just like, no, no, no. She loves it when I'm a strong man. Now, strong man doesn't mean I order her into submission or beat her. None of those things.
Right.
You know, but she's drawn to that. There's something in her that is attracted to when I'm not just sort of being a sniveling victim. And again, it makes me sound callous when I'm actually a very caring and empathetic person. But I also think, you know, being strong is a good thing, and we got to stop tearing that down.
I agree with you. I say that all the time, actually. Like, so toxic masculinity was the concept behind it, right? Which is when masculinity is being used to belittle people, you know, or to abuse women, or to promote misogyny. The concept, 100%, that is a real thing, right? That insecure manhood that has to, you know, get a lifted truck and a leather jacket and be the bad boy to get attention. That's a real thing that exists. But what they did by putting toxic and masculinity together for, you know, 10 years, you didn't hear the word masculinity without the word toxic in front of it. And then the American Psychological Association comes out with an article saying traditional masculinity is harmful to boys. And I'm like, no, you're not paying any attention. Like, you started to just cheapen the concept of being a man and saying that being a man is bad. Yeah, so 100% I agree with you on that. You're 100% right. Like, it is good to be a man.
Men. The world needs good men.
Yeah, and we all, no matter where we're at, need to fight to be even better men. You know, like, don't be content with that spot that we get in, right? Where we're like, okay, I've arrived. You never arrive. You arrive when you die.
So here's the thing: is it's always going to be, like, in a sense, a fight, going against the current. And there'll be times when there's little, like, I guess, you know, in this analogy of going upstream, you know, there's little eddies and things off to the side where you can kind of go and rest when you need to. Rest is necessary. I was trying to sleep 5 hours a night, power lift 2 hours a day, work 14 hours a day running my business, snorting pre-workout, caffeine, ephedrine, stimulant junkie, somehow trying to, you know, my way into, like, being a better man, and it didn't work, apparently. You know, they had a nervous breakdown. We didn't get into anxiety and depression and stuff. That's another topic for another episode. But so we need rest. But, you know, we have to be prepared to work and fight for this, because I heard an interesting quote. And again, I'm not so much, I guess, into conspiracy theories, but I'm like, man, okay,
I
cool.
am, by the way.
But
I'm
like,
Go ahead.
I just understand human psychology. And I'm like, those who are in power want to stay in power and want to accumulate more and want to accumulate more wealth and things like that. Like, it just makes sense from a human behavior perspective. So it was said that, like, when a ruling body fears an external population, an external threat, they masculinize their men. Right? Think World War II, like, you know, and how they projected, like, masculinity. When a ruling body fears an internal threat, they feminize their men. And what are we doing right now? We're basically, metaphorically and maybe literally in some cases, cutting off men's balls. Right? Like, we're killing testosterone production. We're through food, through, you know, media, through all this kind of stuff, normalizing obesity. You know, obesity is damn hard. Okay, like, it's hard to be that. And it's hard to fight against it. And I understand when people want to give up and not fight against it, but it's like, if you don't fight for yourself, nobody else is going to. And so, we got to fight we have to fight to be better men.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. Speaking of which, it kind of brings me to the point of the interview where I like to ask all my guests a couple questions. And so we've kind of touched on this, but the first question is, what does it take to be a man?
Yeah, and I thought about that a lot, and I think I want to give a shout out to Alan Smith, you know, author of Men Fight for Me and director of Saving Innocence, who he wrote a section in his book on what does authentic masculinity look like, and it's like, we take responsibility, we are providers, we're willing to be protectors, we take care of our health. So in other words, we do take ownership of our lives, and we're not afraid to step into difficult situations. And so, but the other part of it is we're also not afraid to experience emotion. It doesn't mean we're ruled by them. It doesn't mean, but we don't blunt and numb and deny that these emotions exist. So we're in an emotionally healthy place where we give space to experience emotion without necessarily being entirely controlled by emotion.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, we've had Alan on the podcast, so if anybody's hearing that and they want to go back and listen, that podcast with Alan Smith with a Y, Smyth, is a great podcast episode. So make sure you go back and listen to that. So
I think he's in episode 43 on my podcast, Between the Before and After. So
that's awesome.
There too.
That's awesome.
Great story. Love that guy.
Yeah. He's got an awesome heart, and like you said, like takes action and says, okay, here's an evil in the world. How about we take care of this instead of just sitting back and letting it exist? So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, let's say we're able to suspend the laws of space and time. I don't know, maybe you climb into the TARDIS or something. I don't know. However this is going to happen. You go back and you get the chance to talk to 10-year-old Jonathan. What are you going to tell him?
I kind of want to keep it simple and just say, it's okay to have those feelings. You're not less of a young man for having all those feelings, but don't let them own you. So give space to that, so you develop healthy emotion, but don't let them own you. And if you're going to be a man, it's going to mean taking responsibility for your actions, and I'll help you do that.
Awesome. And what is your best advice for the men that are listening today?
I really think that compassionate awareness, it's a topic I talk about quite a bit in various arenas, but this compassionate awareness is where we create transformational change. So what I mean is, we can't change what we're not aware of. So we have to be willing to step into the conscious awareness of like, here's where I'm struggling. Here's the things I'm not doing so well with. We have to face that if we're going to change it. The lens of compassion, we kind of talked about earlier, that lens of compassion allows us to look at that without judgment. So maybe somebody's struggling with pornography. I'll use that one as an example because it's a pretty hot button one, I guess, in a sense. You're not a bad person. It's literally like it's a super stimulator. Brain goes, can barely handle. But you've got to bring that into light and say this is a problem. But it doesn't mean I'm a hopeless man because of it. So compassionate awareness, the ability to wrestle with our demons in the light, that's the space where we create transformational change.
Excellent. Jonathan, if our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to make that happen?
Say freedomnutritioncoach.com is my website. So that's where I do the nutrition coaching stuff. And then of course, I'd love for people to check out the podcast Between the Before and After, where really we share stories of people overcoming adversity. We try to get into some of the nitty-gritty details of what it was like going through those experiences as well, similar to what we've shared about here. And so I'd love people to check that out, Between the Before and After.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link that up in the show notes. Dude, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we could talk for another hour, so I'm going to keep you on speed dial. We're going to do another interview down the road, man, okay?
Yeah, we'll do it up on my show as well.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you. Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your story and your struggles and just the amazing way that you have overcome it. It has been helpful for me to be able to reframe things and to view things through that mindset, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Guys, if you want to know more about the work that he's doing, check out the show notes. We've got a link to his information, and you can get plugged in with what he's doing there. He's doing some amazing coaching and some amazing work, and I want to definitely be able to put that in front of you, so check the show notes for that. Guys, please don't forget the contest to win the Black Pearl knife from Haynes Knives. So if you want to go to our website at manlihood.com/contests, you can enter for that. Don't forget to join the Manlihood Man Cave, which is our private Facebook group. It's for men only, and it's a place where we can encourage each other and build each other up. I'd love to have you there in the group. Guys, I appreciate you, and I thank you for listening. I thank you for supporting the work we're doing here at Manlihood. 500,000 downloads so far, guys, which I'm really excited about, and looking forward to seeing what we're going to do in Season 7. I love you guys. I care about you, and I'll see you next time.